Welcome to Beyond the Billboard, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of out-of-home advertising. I'm Greg Wise, and I've spent years helping brands navigate the world of marketing and media planning.
And I'm Charlie Riley. I've spent 2 decades leading marketing teams who've pondered the same question about out-of-home. If you're a growth-focused marketer looking for data-driven ways to stand out, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Billboard. I am Charlie Riley, head of marketing at OneScreen, who powers this podcast. We've got a unique guest. I'm sure you've seen her if you're watching this anywhere. And I say that in a positive way because Tas Bober, founder, president, all things at the Scroll Lab. Unique way to think about how we're going to address this topic today, because we usually talk about brand. We usually talk about out-of-home advertising. Tas is a landing page expert, and she shares a lot of great insight about really what we do is we help the planning side of an out-of-home campaign. But a lot of marketers may not be thinking about where you direct someone to or what you want them to do. And Tas helps brands all over all different types of brands convert and put best practices in place. And so we were just having a really good conversation. She's like, hit record because we don't want to lose any of this stuff. We always do this every episode, but really love having you on. Can't wait to dive into this because this is a really unique opportunity for marketers to think about. I'm going to run a campaign. Where am I going to send them to? What's that landing page look like? So Tas, welcome aboard. And let's jump into this. Should be fun.
I'm super excited. Thanks for having me. Also, I think it warrants us explaining to people how you and I even met. We met at Drive last year, and our conversation happened way past our bedtimes. And we got along right from that portion up until now. And you're like, hey, why don't you come on the podcast and talk about something semi-serious? But also, I think in your DM to me, you were like, I think you're going to say some stuff that's going to keep me on my toes. And I was like, I'm in. This is great. That's the kind of vibe I want.
I like being a little nervous. I'm a little nervous right now. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, I'm probably going to start to turn red. I'm very pale and I turn red a little bit, but what I love about what you share online is you're smart and you're funny, but you're funny about it. And I think people want personality in marketing, and AI is commoditizing everything, but you bring an awesome amount of personality, but you bring expertise that I think our listeners are going to hopefully be on their toes with. And there's no mute button. We've sworn here, so you say whatever you want, but I'm excited, and let's do this. You said you didn't know anything about out of home, and I doubt that, because I'm sure you absorb it. So I'm probably not giving you credit with how you frame that. But what I love is you did some homework. So tell me what you found. Tell me, as you're thinking about this conversation, like, what did you find about out of home advertising?
So I told Charlie before we jumped on, and I said, I love when we have a new angle to talk about with regards to landing pages, because I'm very good at the landing page part. But the landing page, a huge component of that is the source of traffic, which is where are people coming in from? Is the message aligning with the ad? And what ends up happening in marketing, and if you're a marketer, you know this very well, you're doing 45 projects and you're just happy to get something shipped that you don't even care. You're like, okay, that campaign's launched, I'm moving on to the next thing. But I think one of the things that we need to consider is, okay, are we also going back to these campaigns? Are we sending them to the right place? And usually the landing page is the afterthought, right? It's the throwaway. So I'm going to give you a different angle today, which I do also for digital ads, but I think it applies here, which is most times when we create a campaign, we'll be like, okay, campaign objective, ads or the keywords or whatever, the ad copy, setup, da-da-da, landing page. It's like the last thing we think about. And I think we need to flip it. So I think you do landing page first, and then any number of creative and the ads that you create from there, whether for out of home or whether for digital ads, that comes from the landing page. So your landing page is the hub, not the ad. And so that's where we get into this management issue where you create an ad and you're like, crap, now I have to create a relevant landing page for this ad. Then you create a new copy for the ad, right? A new variation. You're like, shoot, now I got to have another landing page for this ad. Whereas if you have a landing page and you create different ad variations from the same messaging there, you're already reducing the amount of work and load that you need to do. So back to researching the out of home stuff. So immediately when someone says out of home to me, what's the first thing you think about? Billboards, right? I'm like, well, what other out of home stuff is there? So went to a website and I was like, okay, going through, I was like, oh, yep, bus shelters, airport, posters, billboards obviously included in there. And then there's a bunch of other stuff which is escaping me. But then I was looking at what does the internet say about out of home best practices? So I'm looking through that and it's like, okay, well, you only have potentially 7 to 10 words depending on the space that's available to make an impact. How do you do that? And making sure that it's enough to spark interest. So, unlike a digital ad where you can kind of, I mean, you're limited in space there too, but even a social ad, you have a lot more context you can add around that and give them like context on the problem or the solution and stuff like that. I feel like with out of home, you're not going to do the traditional problem solution. It's almost like the things that grab your attention when it comes to out of home has to be something memorable, funny, creative, sparks curiosity, but also has some clarity as to what someone does. And then you had some examples. I think on your website, you were showing formats of what it would look like. But for me, outside of the format, I was reading the ad copy that some of the companies you featured on there. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. That's pretty buzzwordy. That one, like, I would see that in airport and just like look by because I'm like, what does that even mean? So the same B2B principles apply where you have to get this message across so quickly and spark enough curiosity. So one of the things, I think Cloudflare was on your website and they had a few ad variations and some were better than the others. So some of them was something like secure here, secure there, secure everywhere. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. I know what Cloudflare is because I use them a ton. Would someone who wasn't a customer know what that was? Probably something to do with security. But then you have a different ad. I don't know whether it was them or someone else. And it was like digital transformation. Okay, well, what does that mean? That could mean that's so broad and could mean so many things. So that was kind of like my initial assessment looking at that from a research perspective. And then it was my head of what are some of the things that caught my attention when I was traveling for a conference or traveling for traveling in an airport and things like that. I really liked the one with School AI where it was like it wasn't even trying to promote themselves or the product, but it was very relevant with the placement at the airport that says, "Hey teachers, welcome," or "Welcome to Florida." And it was just one of those things where like, oh, that was really nice. There's no agenda, but it was enough. And then it said school.ai, which is like, oh, I wonder what that is. So that curiosity of like, oh, that's a feel good, really nice message, but I wonder who they are. And then going to their website and looking at that. So, anyway, all to say that we need to start landing page and then go into other stuff. And then you can lean into small things that are like, how do I position this problem in a clear way? Or how do I be funny? Or how do I be nice? And then if they go to my main website, does that match what I've been saying, right? Because we talk a lot about digital ad relevancy. I don't know how you won't be dinged from an out of home perspective, but but you still have to have relevancy, otherwise it's a bad user experience, right?
Well, like you said, if you go there and your one maybe school AI example, you go there and it's talking about gymnasts in Idaho, but
Yeah.
the ad that you saw, and I don't know, maybe this is a very like
Yeah.
roundabout, but the reference you saw was teachers in Florida. You're like, wait a minute, that's not me. And so I think you're spot on. And I think the context part is the context of the campaign is the important thing. That campaign that you just referenced, I don't know who ran that, but they obviously were trying to attract a very targeted audience there and that's very event based. They're
Yeah.
probably doing that for a conference where we work with some brands who are doing a longer tail brand campaign. And they might say, we're going to pick almost like an ABM campaign. We've got our top 50 customers or prospects. They're in these 5 cities. So we're going to do campaigns in those cities.
Mhm.
And so to your point, do you start with the landing page or the copy there and or the creative copy on the ad to say, hey, GTM decision makers in Buffalo or Des Moines, wherever that is? Or like you said, do you go broad and hope that they know who you are from a branding standpoint? Like you just gave a lot of really good thoughts to think about there. But I think what we find is you're right. The context of the campaign usually starts with the planning. And I think you're right, where it goes from planning to creative to maybe that consideration for landing page. But I like how you're thinking to flip that. And hopefully the idea is you get someone there, but when you get them there, you know that you're going to get them to do what you want them to do. I like that. I like that thinking.
Maybe it's also an example that would make this more solid. And I'm going to use this example. I actually forget the company's name, but the product category is background checks. So background check software. And this is fresh in my head because I did like a CRO game show and we rewrote the headline of this background check software company. And for example, if you're planning an out of home campaign for a company like that, where it is also widely applicable, right? So like they could target a lot of people in airports and like who are hiring or in the space of hiring, right? It's a good, like large enough audience where that would be relevant and it's not super niche. Um, so you have something like that, and we rewrote the headline because the headline was like super long with some kind of like seamless whatever AI background checks, and people are like, what? Who cares? So we rewrote the headline. Now, if we had a landing page, say your differentiator was that usually background checks take 2 to 3 weeks, right? Like I've been through so many of those processes before I owned my own company and I was working in house. It was like, oh yeah, I got this job. Oh, I gotta wait for the background check before I give my notice and make sure everything's good. And it takes 3 weeks. And that's the biggest problem is like everybody's waiting for this background check. You're excited about the candidate's excited about you, but oh no, now we got to go through the due diligence. So your landing page is talking about the product, your differentiator, what you do. And maybe the headline says background checks in 3 minutes, not 3 weeks. Okay. Background checks in 3 minutes, not 3 weeks. That's 8 words. We could probably try to shorten that a little bit down for an ad or a billboard, right? An out of home ad. Now, if you have a landing page and you're structuring this and you're like, this is the problem that we're talking about is that these background checks take too long. There's too many intricacies and there's all of these checks that we have to do and all of these different issues with those things. Other tools, it requires a lot of manual input, blah, blah, blah. So you're kind of talking about all the solutions throughout all of it, right? Accuracy might be an issue, all of these things. You have this landing page, you create it, it talks about your product, your differentiators, your problems, how your solution solves for it. Now you start to create the ads. What are the variations of your ads that you can make? You can match the same exact headline. You can literally put that on a billboard that says background checks in 3 minutes, not 3 weeks. People would understand immediately you offer background checks. You understand the problem is that it takes too long, but now that problem goes away because we can do it in 3 minutes. And then you have a vanity URL, which we can talk about, because obviously you had mentioned before we hit record, people don't have the dwell time. They're walking by in an airport, they're driving by in a car. You can be like QR code and like someone's like, you know, getting T-boned because they're trying to get a QR code to work on their phone.
It's funny you
Right?
say that. It's illegal to have QR codes on certain types of formats
Ooh.
because of that. You don't want somebody to get into a car accident and get sued for that. But yeah, not to deviate, but you're spot
Yeah.
on. Yeah. I
Yeah.
like where I like where you're going with this.
Yeah. So you have that. And then maybe the vanity URL is something short and sweet that just says whatever the company's name slash hire right or hire fast, right? Something like that, where even the vanity URL lends to the message of
Yep.
you can do this very quickly. That is something that will stick in their head. And then you want to try a different variation in a different location where maybe you want to play into the accuracy piece more than the speed part. You can say accurate background checks in 3 minutes, higher right or whatever. And then your URL, higher right. Now you have different ad variations without having to change your landing pages to always match that. And now you can have this landing page that has these messages about accuracy, about speed, even long tenure or something like that, like people going through them and getting a lot of tenure. So I'm just like making stuff up. But those are ways that you can come up then with different ad variations from a single landing page, not having to worry about changing the landing page because there is relevancy still on the page. But you can come up with different ad formats based on that. So that's something that I would think about using a landing page and then having the spokes as the creative for out of home.
I love that, because as you were talking through that, it's to put on to start with the wider copy that goes on the landing page that makes you get all those attributes out on paper. Everyone agrees upon that. And then in the way I'm thinking about that campaign is you're probably that company's probably targeting an HR decision maker to buy that because they are doing the background checks for companies. So immediately I'm thinking, where are these huge conferences that focus on HR decision makers? How would we plan around that? Well, like as your example there, instead of just thinking of one creative and starting with that creative, you've got 5 or 6 iterations of that. I would maybe wrap 5 cars in a swarm and have each of those cars have a different value prop. And so you've got 5 driving around, and all of a sudden it's, oh wait, speed, accuracy, boom, boom, boom. Like there's that. Yeah. Or you could do things like, and what we've done with companies, we use data to be able to figure out, we know that the majority of people that attend this event in the past have come from Atlanta or from Boston. So we're going to wrap the baggage claims in these terminals versus this terminal because we know that this is where they land, and you have rotating copy there. Or you buy the billboards on the way to the airport, or from the airport to the hotel. So they're like the execution's there, and that's just around a conference sponsorship. Like you could do that with, like, we would do a control group in one city where the message is accuracy, and then the other city is the same formats, but the other city is, like you said, speed. And then you do which one showed a better lift. So I love that, starting with the fuller story, and then that narrows down because, like you said, on that creative, on that canvas that you have on a billboard, you've got 8 words, you've got less than 10 words. So how do you make that impactful? But your example, like someone that sees that's going to know exactly what you do. And if it's a vanity URL, so it's easier to remember, 3minutechecks.com or whatever that is, it redirects, you can track that. But like, I love that thinking. That's a really good idea. That's a different way to think about how to build a campaign like that.
Yeah. And you could do it in multiple places. So obviously we were both at Drive last year. And if anybody attended Exit 5's Drive event, the thing that got a lot of buzz there was when Story Lane had the truck that kind of drove by everybody having their breakout sessions outside. And even though there was a different sponsor for interactive demos at Drive, Story Lane had this truck that came in and everyone was talking about the truck. And at that point, interactive demos have really grown in the last year. Like people understand what they are. I would say it was a little bit earlier then. People like still trying to figure out like, whoa, what's this? And so some of the examples I also saw on your website is sometimes people just put the product category as the ad. In my mind, I'm like, okay, that's fine as long as the product category is clear. So if you just have something that's like revenue generating platform, you're like, okay, what? I don't even know what that is. I saw a hockey stack ad or Story Lane. And so with Story Lane, their product category is pretty clear where you can say interactive demos, right? But for someone who may not know what that is, maybe it would be worth using those 7 words to like talk about what that actually was. Like, what if your prospect could demo without you? Something like that, where it's a little more sparking curiosity and saying, how would I do that? And then they go to Storyline and be like, oh, it's an interactive demo platform. So you don't have to even be that clever. It's just reframing something to utilize the space a little bit better. And then the other piece is also like how it displays on the ad. So there was another one I saw and it was like some letters were bigger and some letters were smaller. And it was almost like my brain was so confused because of the formatting that even those small things matter with how the creative's laid out. And I know I'm going more creative than landing page, but that was just some of the things that stood out to me where it's like, oh, okay. Then you take them to a landing page where it's like, how can my prospect demo without me? And then you take into this page that's the demo environment that doesn't need you or whatever. And then you can go into the story of like how you can create those in like 3 minutes and it's really quick and all of the stuff. Obviously, I've full disclosure, I've worked with Storylane too for like brand partnerships and stuff. So I'm actually quite familiar with their product. But that was like one of the things where I would be like, oh, okay, this is how I would phrase it. This is the landing page that I would take them to around that curiosity peak of like, wait, how do I demo without my salesperson? How does that work? Answering that question.
Do you want to run your own account-based marketing program, but you're feeling overwhelmed by complex jargon, expensive tech stacks, and unclear strategies? Scrappy ABM Podcast offers proven strategies and actionable plays that you can use to get started with quick wins. Learn at your own pace, simplify ABM to start seeing real results. Visit Scrappy ABM Podcast or tune into the Scrappy ABM Show wherever you listen to podcasts.
You're not only like a brilliant copywriter, a landing page connoisseur. It sounded like you were like one of our, we should be hiring you for a sales team earlier on, like the way you like, so I don't know what's going to come of this. It sounds like you might be working for us, but I love that you're focused on the net takeaway for someone who's paying for that billboard or that ad. And it's the same thing for digital. I think there's a lot of opinions that I think contribute. As marketers, we all know that everyone has an opinion about, like, that everyone's a great creative person. So everyone has opinions about what it should say and like using buzzwords. But I think you just gave some really great examples of how to simplify a message on an ad. You've got a small window to simplify a message and to pique interest. And then the landing page should tell more. And it should just be that continual, oh, I want to learn more. I want to go to the next level of this. I want to learn more. Tell me. It's just building the trust there. So I think we can, as marketers, we get wrapped up in, I got to be unique. I got to be creative, or I got to say this. I got to use buzzwords like everybody else does. But at the end of the day, someone wants to feel trust that you're going to actually solve a problem for them, not just tell me what everybody else does. And I think that's really important for someone to think about, not only in the creative, but back to your point about that's starting from a copy doc, from a landing page that everyone agrees upon. And then that builds into the creative and probably builds into the planning process. Because going backwards from your example, you could literally buy billboards anywhere for a background check company. Because like you said, their TAM is pretty much anybody. But by thinking through the story that you're going to tell on a landing page, then maybe like how you're going to tell that on an ad, that helps you think about the placement of where, oh, here's 5 really good conferences we should go to, or here's a really good concentration of companies that are hiring. This would be a great execution here. Let's look at the inventory that we have in that region. I think I like that. I like how you've backward engineered that. That's just, we haven't thought of it like that before. I haven't thought of it like that before.
That's so for me, obviously, like that's my area of specialty, right? Is the landing page as the hub. And I do the same thing when I'm showing them how the ads could function using the landing page as a hub. And what ends up happening is we get into marketing debt very easily, where it's, we have this campaign, we're going to create all these assets around this one campaign. Oh, now we have another campaign, we're going to create all the assets around that campaign. And that's how I was in-house too. So like, I can't fault the teams for doing that. That is a set process. That is the industry standard, whatever. And then once I went from in-house to outhouse, as I like to call it, then I realized, I'm like, oh, this is not an efficient way to do this at all. And so outside of like, say we're not promoting a one-time event or a webinar or whatever, right? We're going to talk about promoting us as a company, Storylane as an interactive demo platform, whatever. You would think about first, even before the landing page, what is the research process that a buyer is going to go through? One, they're going to realize that they even have a problem. Sometimes they don't. There's not always a burning problem. So they're not problem aware. They're just going about their life doing this inefficient thing. And you make them aware of the fact that, hey, by the way, you're doing this in a really inefficient way, which is where a Storylane ad would pique curiosity, because it's like, hey, you can do a demo without you. And you're like, what? Oh, I didn't know that was a possibility, right? For something like that. Now, background checks, it's already a problem. People just learn to live with it, right? Where they're like, oh God, yeah, background checks just take 2 to 3 weeks. It sucks, but that's just like stalling a process. That one, you can talk more about the problem versus making them aware of it. So when we look at this, say we take Storylane and we're like, okay, how are people researching this? You pique their curiosity. You tell them that, hey, you're probably doing this in an inefficient manner. There's a better way to do things. You go into the solution. Then you're thinking, oh, this person's now opened up to, oh, I know what interactive demos are. Who are the other vendors? Is there someone who's cheaper, better, faster, stronger, right? Kanye West lyrics insert, and then you start doing comparisons. So they're trying to do comparisons, and then they're like, oh, have other people used Storylane? Okay, then I'm going to look up Storylane reviews, and I'm going to do all of these things. So that is the natural progression, right? They're going to look at alternatives, they're going to look at comparisons, they're going to look at the pricing, they're going to look at reviews. So that's when I came up with this concept of what's the business case for them to justify the cost of purchasing something like Storylane. You put this business case together, and that has everything, the alternatives we talked about, the reviews, all of those things. We put it in a consolidated view, and we're like, these are all the interactions and all the research that the buyer is going to do, and it's staring us back in the face for our own company. Now we can create the landing pages around each stage of this journey. So we always talk about ABM, and like the ABM is like, I come to this landing page, it goes, hey, Tas at Microsoft, wanna blah, blah, blah. And it's like, bro, just because you used my name and my mother's social security number and my logo doesn't mean I'm automatically going to buy from you. So I always talk about ABM from the standpoint of where are they in their research journey? And then you're not getting into the PII mess. You're getting into like, this is where they are. If they're looking for alternatives and comparisons, are you controlling that narrative or is someone else doing it? So you create these 4 or 5 foundational pages, which is one's for your product. Someone doesn't know what you are. Here's who you are, what problems you solve, how you solve them. Someone's looking at alternatives, Storylane versus the alternatives. What are your other options in the market for interactive demos? Why they're better or worse, not for me. Reviews, right? How does Storylane fare with my peers? What's the pricing? Can I see a demo of the product? Those are kind of the areas that a buyer would go through. You create those 5 landing pages, right? 4 or 5. Now you have ads for each of those. So say you had a market for Storylane in San Francisco, you initially did a product ad that was kind of like, demos can survive without you, whatever. And you saw a really good lift in the market. So you're like, okay, cool. We had X penetration, whatever, however you track your metrics. And now you can run through an alternatives ad, which is a little more about Storylane's differentiator, like why they're better than somebody else. Or you have a Storylane review and it's just like a one-liner from a customer who's a notable customer that you're anchoring on that rocket ship. So you can do that. And then you could be like pricing if you are affordable or like you have a better, less confusing thing, whatever. You can put that on a billboard. All of these have dedicated landing pages already. You can do different variations of these landing pages. You never have to rebuild again, but you could just do different ad variations to test what gives you better lift in the market, better reactions, and take them to those specific vanity URLs that's like Storylane reviews or Storylane/reviews or whatever, and just see how people are interacting on those pages.
Love it. I love how you re-engineered that thought process, but like the core of what the assets and the resources you'd have at your disposal there, from a handful of landing pages to just a cadre of ads now that you could build out of that. That's love it. Love it. That's really smart. What would be one best practice that someone listening from a landing page standpoint, if they can make one edit right now that could maybe improve their conversion or whatever, like what would you suggest they do just the first thing off the bat?
I always tell them the first thing you can do to optimize any landing page is the copy, right? You could have a ratchet design, whatever, just as assuming that your site loads. Okay. So obviously, like that aside, say your site is working, shows up in under 3 seconds, hopefully. The next thing is going to be content. Content is always king. That's the first thing. And then I would actually take all the copy on your page. Okay. Open ChatGPT, put all that copy in there and say, give me a buzzword count. And you will be appalled. Some sites, there's 50. I'm like, your site isn't even long enough to have 50 buzzwords worth. And then think about ways that you can reframe that. So one of the things, and it's funny, I want to do this little series where I have my 6-year-old and I'm going to pull up B2B websites and just have, because she's reading now. So I want her to read it and tell me what she thinks that they do. And I think it would be hilarious. Obviously, people are going to be like, she's not the ICP. I'm like, yeah, but for something like an out-of-home ad where you have 3 seconds to get someone's attention, they need to be able to understand. So even if Charlie and Tas are like college educated and we're dealing with this stuff every day, the actual statistic in the US is like 76% or something only read and retain at an 8th grade level or below.
Yeah.
So even though you and I can retain or read at a higher level, we prefer to talk like this. We prefer to read like this. We prefer to say bro. That's me mainly. So that's something that like I would say is, can you first optimize for clarity? If someone were to go on your page and ask the common questions, right? Like who, what, when, where, why. So if you're like, who are you for? What do you do? So not revenue generating platform. Are you a video tool? Then just say video tool. Okay. Like it's fine. No one's going to think less of you. They care more about what you do. Those are the things that you need to put in there. So like what problems you solve, who for, your product category in the clearest way possible, and then how you solve 2 to 3 of those core problems. Not every feature, how you solve those problems. And then always put an FAQ block in there where you can reiterate some of the actual objections you get in feedback or in sales calls, things like that. You get a lot of insights. And then the other thing is my favorite, which is eyebrow copy. So an eyebrow is the little bitty text that shows up right above a headline. It's like it's just like a little tag almost. And what I love about that is you can even put like your product category there, and then you can get more creative with the copy, right? So instead of your headline being background verification software and you've used up all that good space by having to like plaster that on there, you have a little eyebrow that says background verification software. And then you go background checks in 3 minutes, not 3 weeks. That kind of gives them context of what category it is. And then you can get a little more creative with the headline and the subhead and things like that. And then if you go into the smaller ones, it says like FAQs, reviews, or testimonials. So those little tags, what ends up happening too is if someone's searching, then you're more likely to also show up for that keyword, but it's there in a
Yeah.
relevant spot, not just like keyword stuffed or hidden somewhere.
That's
It gives
brilliant.
some logic and flow too.
That's brilliant. Yeah, it's almost subconsciously there, but like you said, it's still there for search. It's still, you're seeing it, but it's not you're not wasting valuable real estate by putting that front and center. Love that. That's a great
It's
tip.
organizing the information too. Cause like I love to use Stripe as an example. I love Stripe's website. Visually, it's one of the best websites. People praise it all the time. Structurally, it's a lot. It's really overwhelming because you think the page is done and then it goes on for 20 more scrolls. So for me, I'm like, how did they think about this? What was the organization here? Is this benefits? Is this outcomes? Are these the features? Are these integrations? Is this an extra thing? It's so much information. You have to strike a balance. So what those little tags do and those little eyebrows do is just lay the information in an organized way where if someone is looking at it and going, oh, I don't need to know about the FAQs. They can just go to like, what's the next thing, right? Testimonials or whatever. So it gives some organization to your blocks as well and tells people, okay, there's a layout. There was some thought process that went into how we structured this content.
Tess, that's a brilliant idea. Anyone listening should go and I'm going to go look at, I don't think we have eyebrows right now, but I'm going to go paint some on,
Yeah.
or whatever you do. So I forget, I don't know which is what, but that's awesome. That's a really good idea. And I think just how you've broken down simple concepts, like we overcomplicate everything as marketers, and we love to acronym and we love to just, over engineer everything. But you simplified it from the standpoint of starting with the core story and everything can be built out of that. And in an out of home ad example, and to give you a lot of credit, you did your homework and you understand it. Like you understand the difference between an airport ad versus a large format billboard that, you are going 6 seconds and you have a small window, but then also there's all these different formats, even things like you can wrap a blimp, you can wrap cars, you can do all kinds of fun stuff. But at the end of the day, like, where are you sending them to? And what do you want them to do with that? What's the story they're going to take out of that? I love that that's the foundation. So you gave some great tips. If someone's not already following you on LinkedIn, they should, but where else can someone find you or find your information or even get in touch to work with you and help paint some eyebrows on their landing pages?
Okay. So obviously find me on I share a lot of landing page content that could apply to your campaigns as well. I have a free landing page resource hub with all content and tips by category. So, like landing pages, B2B SaaS, website strategy, that kind of stuff. I know a little more about more than landing pages too, because I used to lead digital and website teams. So, there's a lot of website strategy stuff. But you can also find my website, thescrolllab.com, spelled exactly like how you'd spell it. And then if none of that appealed to you and you're like, I don't care about landing pages, I don't want anything from you, then find my playlist on Spotify. It's just called Tas, TAS. And it's all sorts of ratchet music that I've collected from 2014 up until now. And you can live my life as I have lived it with those soundtracks until now.
And you're a producer slash artist, B2B artist. So you're not giving yourself enough credit. And I didn't give you enough credit. I was pigeonholing you into landing pages. You are a brilliant marketer, hilarious, funny as hell. So yeah, between your albums that have been published, I don't know if you've gotten any Grammys yet, but I'm sure one's coming. And you're just ripping apart the industry on a podcast. You share a lot of great stuff. So please go follow Tess, and we really appreciate it. This was awesome. I think we could keep going, and maybe we'll have a part 2 because you shared a lot of great insights. So thank you for coming on, and thanks for all the tips for everybody and how to think differently. That's what we should be doing. So that was awesome. Thank you.
Of course.
Greg will be back with us for the next couple episodes, but thanks for joining this episode of Beyond the Billboard, and we'll be back to talk brand, out of home. I don't know. We cover a lot of stuff here, but thanks for joining, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to Beyond the Billboard.
If you liked what you heard, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And if you found value today, share this with a fellow marketer who should be thinking bigger about out-of-home advertising.
If you're looking for a template to build your out-of-home program, visit onescreen.ai to get a free media plan, or connect with us on LinkedIn for all the latest out-of-home insights.
This has been Beyond the Billboard. We'll see you next time.